Do the job you were hired for or have it ripped out from under you. This is a long one, so get ready. Or marked the key paragraphs with asterisks. You can also skip to the end for the summary TLDR if you don't have the time. Most people, including myself, have lived in an apartment at least one time or another in over the course of their lives, and can attest to the nuances and annoyances that come from a poorly designed building. Within walls, loud neighbours, circuit breakers tripping, poor air conditioning, lackluster lighting, abysmal parking, etc. I have personally experienced all of these, and in my college years I was also part of the problem. Loud parties, loud music, etc. We upset many of our neighbours. So after getting the partying out of my system, putting my nose to the books, and graduating with a degree in electrical engineering, I found myself several years later working with a developer of multifamily housing. Hoping to right some wrongs from the past, I pledged to make the experience for the people who would be living in the community a bit better than my own. I couldn't control the building materials or aesthetics of the complex, but I did have control of the design of the electrical system, from the utility transformer to the outlet you plug your hair dry into. I therefore set out to design a robust system with more circuits per apartment, better lighting, better materials, and better access than what was typical for the building construction at the time. The first step was to tackle the exterior lighting for the complex. Instead of using metal halides, those large shoebox lights that was at night, I persuaded the developer to install LED pole and building-mounted lights. These were designed to increase the light output of the parking area and walkways for safety, while maintaining cut-off so it wouldn't intrude into someone's bedroom window. They looked good, saved energy, and had a higher color rendering index 80 than the standard metal halides 70. It took a while to get the calculations correct, but in the end I was happy with it. Moving on to the apartment units, my design philosophy was such that no one at any time should be overloading any circuit within the apartment under normal use. No lights should dim when appliances, vacuums for example, were plugged in. Every room had access to plugs on every wall. Every room should have a light, and every light should be controlled by a switch, and every switch should be within arm's length of any entry point into the room. I spent several weeks refining the project template, and after some back and forth with our clients, the developer, some items were cut, but the majority remained as per the design intention, which was spelled out to the T. I was happy, they were happy, and after the drawings made their way through permitting, the developer hired the contractors, and the project was underway. Everything was going great until the general contractor hired the electrical subcontractor. For the purpose of this story, we shall call this electrical contractor Eddie, not his real name. As a contractor, you sign a contract stating that you will build what is shown on the drawings for a certain price. If the client accepts your offer, you win the contract. In doing so, you're obligated to provide what was shown on the drawings unless an addendum, revision, or substitute modifies the original contract, all of which must be approved by the engineer. It all started when I started receiving his submittals. For those not in the industry, this is a standard practice between the contractor and engineer, where the contractor will submit the materials he intends to use on the project to the engineer for approval. It is typical to see deviations from the design here and there, as contractors will typically source most of the building materials from a select number of vendors, a single vendor being ideal. The vendors will provide alternates to the design, and it's up to the engineer to determine if these substitutes are acceptable or not. The first submittal was for the exterior lighting, which was complete garbage. He submitted metal halide lighting, which was not only the wrong type of light, but the wrong distribution, which would cause backlighting into the residence windows at night, the wrong color temperature, and the wrong output to dim. I rejected the submittal outright, and told him to provide the light fixtures shown on the plans, which specifically indicated that no substitutions were allowed due to the calculations that were involved in the design, photometrics. I gave him a call to explain this fact, and told him to resubmit per the plans. Eddie wasn't happy. Not happy at all. However, Eddie does submit another fixture which was slightly better, but still not on par with the design. Again, I reject the submittal and state that unless he can prove that the fixture he submitted is similar to or superior than the photometrics shown on the drawings, it will not be accepted. It is not the engineer's responsibility to prove a substitute, and if he wants to use this fixture, he'll need to submit his own photometric calculations as well to prove the point. So Eddie does this. The calculations look good, really good, so good that I get suspicious and run his light fixture in my own model. and nothing matches at all. It's not even close, which means he forged information on a contractual document, and now I had leverage for what happens next. The client calls and asks what is holding up the project. I call my boss and explain the situation. He agrees and backs my case to the client, which leaves Eddie with no choice but to provide the fixtures he agreed to when he signed the contract. This back and forth continues with several other submittals, which become shorter and show less information. I call Eddie to tell him he's missing items, and he responds with excuses and after some time ends up not returning calls or emails. Time passes and I move on to other projects. Then I get a call from our client that some of the buildings are ready for a walkthrough, and he would like me to do a site visit to check the work before drywall is installed. We set a date, and I'm off to check it out. I arrive and see the site lighting that started our feud. It's correct and looks good, and I feel optimistic, hoping he learned his lesson. But it wasn't until I entered the first of the apartment units. The first thing I notice is the wiring is white. This is typical for smaller gauge Romex wire number 14, and our drawings show number 12 wire, 12 to Romex, typically yellow, which was our office standard. I take a closer look and confirm this is the case. Now, usually I don't take issue with this if it's brought to our attention ahead of time, and if it's used for lighting circuits only. 14 to Romex is perfectly acceptable to use regardless, it's industry standard and code compliant. It just doesn't match our drawings and would require an unnecessary revision on our part to match what Eddie had his guys install to save himself from money without first discussing with us, me and my client. But then I look around at the circuiting and I'm dumbfounded. Except for a few dedicated circuits, the drawings weren't followed at all. Lights and power circuits were combined, as were the rooms. As it stood, it would have been just another shitty apartment with the same problems I had spent so much time working to rectify in the first place. Again, we could have discussed this ahead of time, bounced ideas off each other and worked it out. I worked as an electrician to pay for college for years, so I know the nuances of wiring methods well, and enjoyed troubleshooting problems with electricians. Except this was Eddie, and Eddie fucked up. Instead of working through the problem, he went off the radar and went rogue. Eddie was about to pay for his transgressions. ProRevenge, or asterisks from this point onward. I wrote my report along with my pictures and copies of the plans. It looked like a murder scene with red lines, strike-throughs, captions, and comments, which illustrated clearly and definitively the stark differences between what was designed and the dumpster fire that was installed. It was sent to our client and my best buddy Eddie, which is standard. The client was pissed. We got on a call and Eddie got chewed out for his poor communication and decision to abandon the plans and do his own thing. However, Eddie did have something on his side, which was the electrical code. Even though the plans were completely ignored, he was still in compliance, and he made that point clear. Except I had an ace up my sleeve. When I sent out the report, I didn't just send it to Eddie and the client. I also sent it to the AHJ, authority having jurisdiction, which in this case was the building official for the county. We'll call him Mark for the purpose of this story, again, not his real name. Mark and I had gotten to know each other well over the course of the project. We discussed theory, code restrictions, etc., to make sure that he knew what I was doing before the drawings were sent out for review. During our talks, he made it abundantly clear that whatever the drawings stated, as long as there weren't conflicts between the drawings and the code requirements, was exactly how the project should be built, period. Looping back to the phone call between myself, the client, and Eddie, I suggested we add another person to the call who was the project's superintendent. We call him Steve. Steve and I had previously discussed Eddie's failure to follow the drawings while I was on site, and I had pointed out to him that Mark had said any deviations from the plans would mean that the project wouldn't pass inspection unless the drawings stated otherwise. I asked Steve about this on the call, and he acknowledged the discussion and agreed with what had been said. Eddie at this point was fuming and said he had spoken to Mark as well and that this was not true. Really? I said. Is that a fact? Well, let's get him on the phone as well then, shall we? So we called Mark, and thank everything that is holy, he answered. I filled him in on the discussion, my conversation with Steve, and he confirmed everything right there in front of the client, Eddie, and Steve. The drawings must be followed, and deviations would not be allowed, or he would shut down the project. I was stoked. Finally, no one could hide, and everything was out in the open. Start of edit, additional information noted with hashes. Apparently, Old boy Eddie was hurting pretty bad now and was trying to recoup the money he knew he would losing from the project. He started by submitting that all wiring allowed be dictated by the NEC. Parkno rejected. Then he submitted the missing FCI breakers he was supposed to install but didn't, which weren't the combination style. Rejected. This went on. I was called back out to the site again. Eddie had started to follow the plans, but was still using 14 for power circuits where the plans called out for 12 too, which meant that the breakers he was installing with the panel boards were also wrong. He was installing the new site lighting with UF cable instead of conduits, which were called out in the plans. He wired the lights in the bathrooms to the load side of the GFCI, which would cause the lights cut out if the GFCI tripped. Note that the lights shouldn't have even been on the same circuit as the GFCI, and he had tied all bathroom GFCIs together. Codius plans no. I mean fucking stupid shit to save a buck when he was already in deep. After my second report and response back to the client, Eddie got destroyed. He was to be liable for all the costs associated with his choices, because the plan stated something to the effect of, any changes resulting from failure to execute the project according to these drawings will result in removal and reinstallation of equipment, conduits, wiring, and devices at no cost to the owner. I made sure to quote that directly in my report and let the client know personally just in case it was overlooked. Therefore, not only did Eddie had to rip out all of his work in the apartment units, which at this time was 3 buildings at plus or minus 30 units per building, he couldn't even use the wire he had purchased because it wasn't the right gauge. Eventually, Eddie had had enough and agreed to do everything per the plans. He had decided in a final letter to beg me and my client to use 14 to Romex for the lighting as I had said I would have allowed it earlier. The client and I spoke and agreed to let him use it for lighting circuits only, and I updated my drawings accordingly. And of Eddie. And that's how I made Eddie, through the decision by our client, and the power wielded by the AHJ. I Mark tear out all the work he did over 2 months on 3 apartment buildings and start over from scratch. To his credit, he did finish the project to completion. Afterwards, he was blacklisted from working on another project again with our client, and I never heard from him again. Moral of the story is do the work you signed up for, and if you have questions, it never hurts to ask. TLDR, electrical engineer designs electrical system for client's apartment complex. Client hires shitty electrical contractor who ignores the plans and screws himself when he's forced to rip out 2 months' worth of work and start over. Thanks everyone for the awards. First gold. I'll provide an update later today with additional details to the latter part of the story. Edit 2. I've added some of the additional details. Hopefully this will shed some additional light on the situation.
Positive revenge. So I'm a terrible person by trade. I'm a dealership sales manager. I'll make this brief. Managed a digital sales team for a year or so. Got really close to the team, trained them, grew the team into number 1 in group, number 2 for our manufacturer and region out of 400 plus dealers. Let go by my general manager, runs the dealership during the start of COVID over the objections of our group corporate. Because my position cost a ton of money in commission, I can direct my pay plan. Fast forward a bit. My old team keeps in touch, asks for assistance every now and then, and I'm always happy to help. I genuinely like these people because I care about their professional development. Nobody has been put in place to replace my old position, though the team's doing really well. I hired great people and put a lot of effort into training myself out of a job. Have a higher title, more responsibility, and run the entire sales side of a different dealership now. I get a call from my old team telling me the management upped their pay to compensate for lower volume, then retracted it after a month. They want to quit and work elsewhere. My current dealer doesn't run a department like theirs, so I have no real need for them. I call people I know. Apparently, my reputation is better known and more highly regarded than I expected. I get interviews for my old team lined up. They're getting new positions, get to keep working together, and all have quite large pay bumps. The delicious part, tomorrow, the GM who let me go is going to receive effective immediately resignations from his entire digital sales department. This department was the number 1 in a group of 15 dealerships. This department accounted for 60 to 70% of the store's sales volume in a given month. Without these trained and capable staff, they're going right back to where they started as far as closing percentage. Based on their current numbers, the GM who fired me is looking at losing 30 to 40% of the store's sales volume. He's actually in danger of turning a loss due to all the investment in digital marketing and sales, which won't see anywhere near the ROI to justify it. Mind you, this is a sizable, franchised car dealership. We're talking millions per month when all runs well. He'll never know I found the team new jobs. He'll never know I called in favors, made introductions, and sold the hell out of these people to their new employers. I didn't do this for the revenge. I did it because I care about my old team and their development. They're amazing at what they do and deserve to be paid highly for it in a lower stress environment than where they were. I got the best revenge I can imagine, and all I had to do was be a decent person and keep cheerleading the team I once helped build and train. Update. I just got a call from a guy I know who does finance and insurance product stuff, and not from my old employer. What did you do, bro? I played coy a bit, asked if anyone there knew it was me. You know I used to be GSM up there. I keep in touch. People are losing their mind. All I heard is the GM's on the war path. So Redacted called me telling me he might need a hookup for a new job. I put two and two together once I heard and called you. So what did you do? Only followed I've heard so far.
Check out my other splendid videos.